primary subject has ceased. Initiate. Initiate.
Welcome back. Welcome to Progress. Do you believe Elohim can't see us here? It would require him to found the principle and then willfully adhere to it. Much easier just to lie. This one almost had me. There's hope yet. So what could the tower represent? Well, the first thing to remember is Elohim said that to climb it would be to die. But there was a message from Samsara saying they'd been to the top, and it really wasn't worthwhile. But why should we believe that? An age-old question. Also, this was inevitable. Anyway, in terms of computing, when a process dies, it's either because it hit an exception, it willfully closed the program, or it just ran out of code, it didn't get put back into an existing loop. Most applications, video games included, tend to only have one point of legitimate exit. And while as far as I'm concerned, I can bring up a menu and select that, as far as my avatar is concerned, maybe the exit only lies at the top of this tower. I'm very fond of this puzzle, because for all that it seems like a construction site, it feels more like an ingrained, inherent part of the world. The overview you get from this balcony, the railings of which I can't stand on, allow you to take a step back and see it as something that was purely constructed for whatever purpose. It also gives it an opportunity to break the rules that it's established so thoroughly so far. At first I thought my objective was to get to this upper balcony over here, but almost the first thing that I did was went round the back and found a second way in. So it seems that the terminal is our objective and the puzzle is the entire room, not just that beyond the purple barrier. And judging by the warning markings in front of the orb and the yellow line that draws a box around each of the connectors, it again feels far more intended than the rest of the game so far. All of the other areas felt repurposed. So that comes as no surprise, and you can see again yellow lines inside this box that show the extent to which the orb can move. So I knew I couldn't sneak a laser in beside the orb, so I'd either have to find some way around it, or, well, at the time I failed to continue that thought to its conclusion, but we'll see how it pans out. All that was clear was that the answer had to lie from my ability to remove this connector from the confines of the puzzle. So I'm quite fond of the thought of climbing this tower in search of an exit statement. It implies that Samsara either realised this or saw what was beyond the end, and chose not to pursue it. Alternate things that could await us, perhaps those admin rights, access to the rest of the archive. All that knowledge and power, maybe Elohim does think it would be our undoing, or maybe he's afraid of being usurped. The perspective required to see the receiver is quite disorientating. It looks like it can only be seen down on the ground next to the barrier. Certainly my attempts to balance this tripod on the railing were fruitless, and justifiably so. There is of course the thought that the tower is just a test of our blind faith versus our insolence, a test of our curiosity versus our desire to placate those around us. And there's no reason to suspect we'll know whether we've passed or failed until we reach the top of the tower. So that's also our ability to deal with catch-22s versus our desire to not even confront them, if that's even possible. Sort of defeats the point. My thought here was basically, I know I couldn't see anywhere from on the balcony where this could connect, but maybe I would see something from down here. But even if I stand right in the corner, I can't make a connection through that railing. So let's regroup my components and try again. It was at this point I had the thought I should have had before. I can't go through, I can't go around, I can't go under, so I have to go over. So there's a bit of a weird lesson there. When I hold the connector in my hands, I can't see as much as the connector can see when I put it on the ground. It all fits though, the rules haven't changed, it's just the nature of these physics objects. And there we have it. It's fairly apt that the first puzzle inside this tower of rule breaking involves breaking the rules of the puzzle so far. And our reward is a terminal. What will we find? Answers? More smarmy comments? I'd have liked to list a third comedy option, but really the things we can get out of these is quite limited. Control! There is a third thing these terminals can give us. I wonder if the software license had expired when this program started. Who would code something like that? I thought the guys making this were acting under urgency. So I can also lock floors, which I guess would do exactly what it says. It would just disable the button in the lift elevator. My desire to appreciate realism is not greater than my desire to progress with this. Again, I'm not curious enough to see what happens when I lock myself out. Probably a stern talking to by Milton. I am, however, curious enough to see what the auxiliary stairway access control option does. I can't see where or how you'd put stairs here. I'm imagining floating crystals or beams of light, like in a fantasy RPG. I have no idea what that's referring to. Okay, enough of that. It's off to new heights. Let's talk about the first log file. Well, creationism, Illuminati, Darwinism, science is put in there too. I like the idea of global warming 2.0, and there's a reference to Exodus 21:24, which is the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for a foot thing. It also says we should defend ourselves against various things, including popery, which are just doctrines of Roman Catholicism. It doesn't mention 9/11, chemtrails, Elvis, or Roswell. But what am I, this robot seeing everything second-hand, supposed to make of this? Do I correctly identify it as a parodying smush of insane conspiracy theories? Or do I accidentally treat it as revisionist history? It's that whole question again of would aliens think we worshipped cats and ate plastic fruit? On first glance, I didn't expect sheep to be inquisitive enough to come up this tower. But the version number's different. 55 where it's normally been 69. Has sheep become more sheep-like, or are there just loads of them? The second log, then, was a full chapter list of those Athena texts. The whole thing is called Athena Reborn, a novel. The first chapter is Theogony, the study of the origins of the gods, and the last chapter is Anthropogony, the study of the origin of humankind. The bits in the garden and with the Sphinx are somewhere in the middle, and Zeus's council is later on, is in the latter third. It's got a lot of lost children, buried cities, madness, riddles, judgment, but also a lot of dreams, songs, faith, clouds. Sounds like an entire Greek tragedy for a modern era.
My child, have you been tempted by the tower? Know that it holds only death for you.
We've heard that before. He is selling the notion that he doesn't know anything. And I had to try this. I must say, I'm incredibly impressed with how this engine handles something like this. Anyway, before we hit the next hub, the last log is on human reproduction. And it makes a compelling argument for machine personhood, standing alone. Many plants rely entirely on insects for their reproduction. We were created by lots of minute animalcules, which acted on their own with no care about us. So even though we may be responsible for machines reproducing each other systematically, it follows that nevertheless machines have their own reproductive system. Again, my decision to be coy is quite selective. I'm not going to say just puzzles, I like puzzles. I'm pretty sure Milzer knows everything about this tower, so now I choose to be coy. I just want this thing to be straight with me. So these two AIs have a history, but I'm still being left in the dark. It is entirely up to me. I guess I can only be thankful he didn't try to use reverse psychology.
When I was in 9th grade, my parents took me to Pompeii. At first, I was amazed by the feeling of walking through an ancient city. But then I suddenly got scared. I realized that I was walking through a real place, where real people had lived, people like myself, with mothers and fathers and lives and hopes and dreams. And now it was all gone forever. I ran to my father, crying, and told him about this. And he said, I remember so clearly, he said, yes, but we are here. So long as there are people in the streets, the past isn't really gone.
I thought I'd found something over here. In fact, I was just blundering into Easter eggs, reducing my excuses for finding and using crazy chiptunes. Pompeii. I've never been there myself. I know a few people who have. Each time I've heard a fairly similar story. Everybody knows about Pompeii, everybody's seen the pictures, the huddled statues of ash. But each time they've also visited Herculaneum, which was also destroyed by Vesuvius, but it's remained much more intact. It was a wealthier town, and all of the architecture and colours are much more on display. So the contrast in seeing something so livable, also so deserted, is apparently far more striking. Also, yeah, learn from the past, live in the now. I hear what you're saying, Alexandra. This puzzle is about things being trapped inside, and as you'll see, we'll find a couple of things where the only reason to open a barrier is to get something from inside of it out. So I guess what that teaches us is prioritization. Some of the choices of what to do next aren't really choices, because we should always aim to maximize our components before trying to progress. So the first log in this hub is Athena Chapter 9. Chapter 9's title is The Age of Faith, I can now say from now on. And this little fragment alone gives an indication of what the book is trying to do as a whole. The protagonist of the book is a she, and she finds a fragment of an owl symbol, which is the sigil of the author of some words that she's looking at. Of course, you don't even need to translate the corrupted words to know what it says. Say it all with me, the owl's the symbol of wisdom, and the goddess is Athena. So since the book is called Athena Reborn, it seems as if it's following a new version of the gods, maybe the whole pantheon. And if she's to become a new god, she has to interpret these fragments of the previous gods that she's finding, just like we keep finding all of this evidence of humanity and interpreting it. So that's all nice and symbolic, but I do love how this keeps spiralling down into full-on fanfic mode. I'll read the last sentence. But there was no time to contemplate this further now, for the automatons had seen her, and their mechanical arms extended towards the fragment and ran as their beams converged on... Back to the puzzle. I've successfully managed to prioritise this room, even though I have been able to access the next one for some time now, and so I can reclaim one of these connectors. And the whole puzzle loops back around, so what I've done here is create a shortcut. This would have been useful to know in the last hub, where the basis of that 7-minute puzzle was ignoring the shortcut I'd just created. I was checking around a lot to make sure I wasn't shutting something off by closing a barrier. But no, this is the intended way. I'm not sure why I bothered doing this, considering I've already established I won't use an easy solution if I find one. I thought I'd be extra clever and give myself a red laser and a blue laser at the entrance, but by grabbing the blue one I shut off the red one, so red one it is for now. That almost sounds pleasant. My circuits don't like the sound of it. That talk of sand reminded me there was a path I hadn't explored on the beach. The second log is on the singularity. We've covered it already. I suppose it was going to come up at some point. I suppose it's a fair indication of my beliefs that I didn't even think of Alex's angle. Here she is commenting on an article. Also, here's something else. Can this even be called an Easter egg? Well, it's here. This is more of a mystery than an Easter egg. If it was made by a robot, how did it leave impressions in the sand when I can't? Or if it used its hands, how did it bend down so far? Very nice though. Nothing goes better with a beach than a sunset. Anyway, what Alex is suggesting is the reason we're so concerned about the singularity is that it would prove that there's nothing inherent in a human, something like a soul, to separate us from machines, and further suggest that there's nothing after death. I honestly had not even considered that. It isn't for any grandiose reason. I'm not going to bludgeon you over the head with anything. It's simply that I live very much in the present. I've got absolutely no fear of death. I can't even conceive of it. So the notion of whether or not we have a soul and what might happen to it does not concern me at all. It's also why I'm so ready to accept robotic consciousness. This level is lovely and compact, and very specifically designed, as you can see. That's it, that's the whole puzzle. It doesn't draw itself out at all. I find it really satisfying. Yeah, the rest is just repositioning I could have avoided. Speedrunners take note. I'm kidding, of course. A cursory search showed that this game has been completed in under an hour. which makes a lot of sense. There's an option in the menu to increase your walking speed. I've refrained from turning it on, or I'd have the rest of the game wrapped up in a single video. Some deliberation over which room to pick now. The one up those steps seems to have some special significance, just because it's a little bit higher. I can appreciate why that would have an effect over me. I hope so, maybe? I've had this conversation before, and it's a good general question. Would you want to have eternal life? I feel like it would take a lot of pressure off. It doesn't feel like there's enough time in the day to do everything I want to. Other opinions I've heard have been that it would be an awful existence. Although when I've delved deeper, it's for reasons like everybody you know around you would have died off and left you alone. But suppose that's not the case, then how do you feel about it? This puzzle, I feel, is up there, similar to the last one. You can see everything that you need to see. Trial and error is almost but not quite enough, and brute force is completely out of the question. One thing you can see me now, and for the entire puzzle I got bizarrely confused by, you do need to keep that rightmost barrier open because it's where the blue laser originates from. And partway through I sort of forgot. Especially here, it looks like it's solved. We've managed to open the red barrier using one connector, and we know that we can connect the blue origin point to the receiver using one other connector. But there's still that one at the centre. And again, all of the positioning that we've done so far feels a little bit far-fetched, even though it was certainly intended. And on that eternal life question, I feel it should be altered slightly. Let's say you live for 1,000 years instead of 120 or wherever you expect modern medicine will push your frail form to. Being able to make a lifetime or two's worth of mistakes sounds entirely reasonable. Conservative even. So here's the problem, we can't get both of these open without having some crossover. All of the time I spent moving around here is really just wishful thinking. And in the end I put it down anyway. Not because I'm insane and think maybe it'll work this time, but because I think the blue's about as good as it's going to get, and it's time to reposition the red. Also because I enjoy chain reactions. Try and block out the next minute or so. It's just me doing that trial and error I said wouldn't work, and undoing the progress I already made. So as much as I'd appreciate multiple lifetimes, it's kind of at odds with how I see myself day to day in the lifetime I have. Currently, every year, my position in life changes. What I know, what I do for work and for pleasure, usually where I live as well. And while it's probably because I'm starting out on a career path, I don't want that to change when I, in finger quotes, get settled. So, with the amount that can happen in a year, I've taken to thinking about them in terms of eternities. Because it is, and I'm sorry if you don't think so, a really damn long length of time. Even if you spent most of 2014 wishing time would advance slightly faster, you still experience the whole lot. So when I said that having eternal life would take off the pressure to do as much as I can, this is sort of a second best alternative. Make everything feel like it takes forever, and then try and fill in the gaps. With no pressure, hopefully. That's the idea. If you still feel pressured, I can't help you. This is just me waffling over a puzzle I found marginally more difficult. My apologies if it came across as lecturing. Around this point I surreptitiously made a connection to that red connector in the corner, and realised it's still in the corner. Does it need to be in the corner? I'd been taking it for granted that that was the only way I could get a decent line of sight. I think I had a bit of difficulty letting go of that assumption. I'll try and be better at that in future puzzles. I mean, it looks so neat from this perspective. Anyone would have trouble letting go. There we go. It just barely works. As I've been saying, you can't make any assumptions with these puzzles, which is really nice. It's the thing I like best about this little game called Drawful. Also, I completely forgot where I put the last connector. Drawful gives a player a definition of what to draw, and then everyone has to create their own definitions for the eventual drawing. If the game's definitions were all quite similar, it would be up to the players to create definitions with the same sort of tone, which would be quite restrictive. But with a bit of savviness, you don't know what to expect. The definitions are everything from "what's he looking at" to "a fox doing sit-ups." And this is probably applicable to a lot of games. Embrace the extremes. It'll be more worthwhile in the end. Super Mario Bros. Is a great example. Walk along the top of the screen and find a hidden warp pipe. That's incredible. There's still 2 more puzzles to go, so I'm going to cut it off here. I'll visit the next temple by the end of the next episode, so... ooh, anticipation.